After 32 years, my husband's sudden interest in his appearance seemed sweet. Then I found a tube of personal lubricant hidden in his sock drawer. Its expiration date, months away, screamed a truth he denied me for 5 long years. I just smiled, handed him his watch, and decided I had to know everything. Like, share, and let us know where you're listening from. Eleanor traced the rim of her coffee cup, the ceramic cool beneath her fingertips despite the warmth of the liquid inside. 58 years old, and a full 32 of them married to Arthur. The numbers felt heavy, a testament to time more than a measure of shared life lately. 32 years. It was a lifetime, a comfortable rhythm, a known quantity. Yet, for the past 5 years, a chilling silence had settled between them, not of arguments or disagreements, but of touch. A quiet, pervasive drought of intimacy that had slowly, insidiously withered the tender shoots of their connection. She'd grown accustomed to it, or so she told herself. At 58 and Arthur, 61, wasn't it natural for desire to wane? He had his aches, his annual physicals that always yielded a new minor complaint. She had her own creeping fatigue, the subtle shifts in her body that whispered of approaching seniority. Eleanor had rationalized her loneliness away, chalking it up to the inevitable currents of aging, the predictable ebb and flow of a long-standing marriage. Their comfortable routine, the shared meals, the quiet evenings watching television. These were the bedrock of their life now, she'd convinced herself. It wasn't passion, but it was peace, or was it just resignation? That morning, the peace was abruptly disturbed. Arthur, bustling in the hallway, called out, "Eleanor, my darling, could you grab my watch? The silver one. I've got that board meeting at 10 and I can't find it anywhere." His voice, a familiar rumble, brought her back from her introspection. "Of course, dear," she replied, rising from the kitchen table. The silver watch was usually in his top dresser drawer, nestled among his cufflinks and pocket squares. She walked into their bedroom, a room that felt increasingly like two separate spaces merged by history. Arthur had a habit of leaving things in odd places lately, a minor annoyance she usually overlooked. She opened the top drawer, the scent of his cologne faintly lingering. No watch. She sifted through his handkerchiefs, then his ties. Nothing. A sigh escaped her lips. Perhaps the sock drawer? He was always throwing things into the wrong compartments. She pulled open the second drawer, revealing a neatly folded array of socks. Striped, argyle, plain black. As she moved them aside, searching for the glint of silver, her fingers brushed against something unexpected. Something foreign amidst the soft fabric. It was a small, sleek tube, cool and smooth to the touch. Her heart gave a sudden, hard thump against her ribs. She pulled it out, her eyes scanning the label. Premium Personal Lubricant. The words seemed to bloom in the sterile morning light, stark and undeniable. Her breath hitched. Eleanor's hands began to tremble, a fine tremor that spread through her arms. She turned the tube over, searching for any explanation, any logical reason for its presence. And there it was, an expiration date clearly printed, nearly a year from now. Not an old, forgotten tube from a forgotten time, but a recent purchase. Months away, the date declared, indicating freshness, immediacy. A silent scream ripped through her mind. When had Arthur last truly touched her? Not with the casual brush of a hand over her shoulder, not the polite kiss on the cheek before work, but truly intimately. She strained to remember, pulling back through the hazy calendar of their lives. It had been years. 5, she calculated again. The number a constant, bitter refrain. 5 years since that spark had died. 5 years since the comfort had swallowed the passion whole. And now this cold clinical evidence that passion, or at least a need for it, still existed for him, but not with her. A choked sound tried to escape her throat, but she swallowed it down, forcing it back. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Arthur! She quickly tucked the tube back into the sock drawer, burying it under a stack of socks, as if by hiding it, she could hide the brutal truth it represented. Her hands were still shaking as she finally located the silver watch, nestled at the bottom of the drawer. Arthur entered the room, adjusting his tie, oblivious. "Ah, there you are, my love." "Find it?" he asked, a pleasant smile on his face. "Yes," she managed, her voice a little breathy, but she hoped he wouldn't notice. She handed him the watch, her eyes fixed on his face, searching for, what, a tell? A flicker of guilt? There was nothing but the usual placid expression. He took the watch, fastened it around his wrist, and gave her a quick, almost perfunctory kiss on the forehead. "Thank you, darling. I'm off. Big day." As he left, Eleanor stood rooted to the spot, watching him go. Now everything looked different. His renewed interest in his appearance, for instance. She had noticed it over the past few months. New shirts, a different cologne, a trim that kept his silver hair looking sharp. She'd attributed it to a renewed sense of purpose, a desire to stay young. But now it felt sinister. His late meetings, often stretching into dinner, were explained as important client dinners. His phone, once left carelessly on the counter, was now always in his pocket, face down, almost guarded. Little things, easily dismissed before, now coalesced into a chilling mosaic. That evening, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table, the same table where she had rationalized their fading intimacy, Eleanor couldn't hold it in any longer. The words felt clumsy, forced. "Arthur," she began, her voice softer than she intended, Are we happy?" He looked up from his plate, a slight frown creasing his brow, as if surprised by the question. "Happy? Of course, Eleanor. We have a beautiful home, financial security, our health. What's not to be happy about?" He gave a dismissive shrug, picking up his fork again. His definition of happiness was purely external, a list of assets and comforts. It barely touched the aching void in her chest. Eleanor swallowed, the food in her mouth suddenly tasting like ash. She knew then that she couldn't simply let this go. That night she lay awake beside him, listening to his even breathing, feeling the chasm that had opened between them widen into an abyss. Her intuition, a quiet voice she had long ignored, was now screaming. Something was terribly wrong, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she needed to know the truth. No matter the pain it might bring, she had to face it. The sun, usually a welcome visitor into their bedroom, felt harsh and unforgiving as it streamed through the window the next morning. Eleanor had barely slept, her mind a frantic battlefield where doubt wrestled with dread. Arthur, on the other hand, had slept soundly beside her, his rhythmic breathing a stark contrast to her internal turmoil. He woke with his usual cheerfulness, showered, dressed, and left for work, with a casual goodbye kiss that landed on her cheek, missing the turmoil that raged beneath the surface. As the front door clicked shut, sealing Arthur's departure, Eleanor felt a strange calm descend. The vague unease of the previous night had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. She couldn't live with the gnawing uncertainty, the silent accusations that echoed in her empty bedroom. If Arthur wouldn't give her the truth, she would find it herself. She quickly dressed, pulling on a sensible pair of slacks and a comfortable sweater. Her movements were deliberate, almost robotic. She drove to an electronics store on the outskirts of town, a place she rarely frequented, preferring her small neighborhood shops. The drive gave her time to rehearse her story, a necessary fabrication to explain her unusual purchase. Inside the brightly lit store, surrounded by gleaming gadgets and flashing screens, Eleanor felt a pang of self-consciousness. She spotted a display for home security systems and discreet cameras. A young salesman, his name tag identifying him as Kevin, approached with an eager smile. "Can I help you find anything, ma'am?" he asked, his voice friendly. Eleanor cleared her throat, her rehearsed words feeling awkward on her tongue. "Yes, I'm looking for some small, wireless hidden cameras," she began, trying to sound casual. "I suspect our housekeeper might be, well, pilfering small items. Nothing major, but it's unsettling." The lie tasted bitter, but it served its purpose. It was a common enough concern, something people could understand. She avoided his gaze, focusing instead on a wall of televisions. Kevin nodded sympathetically. A common issue, unfortunately. We have just the thing. Discreet, easy to set up, and you can monitor them right from your smartphone." He led her to a display featuring an array of tiny devices, some disguised as USB chargers, others as innocuous buttons. He demonstrated a particularly small, cube-shaped camera, no bigger than a sugar cube, with impressive video quality and motion detection. "This model is very popular," he explained, demonstrating how it connected to a phone app. You can get live feeds, review recordings, even set up alerts if there's movement. Very user-friendly. Eleanor watched his presentation intently, nodding at the right moments, asking just enough questions to appear genuinely concerned about her imaginary housekeeper. The technology felt foreign, almost invasive, but her need for answers outweighed her discomfort. The idea of seeing her own home, her own marriage, through such a lens felt both terrifying and liberating. When Kevin quoted the price, $450 for a pack of 2 high-definition cameras, Eleanor didn't flinch. She reached into her purse, not for her usual wallet, but for a smaller tucked-away pouch. Inside lay her secret emergency fund, a collection of cash she had squirreled away over the years from small allowances, birthday gifts, and the occasional untraceable sale of old jewelry. It wasn't a large sum, but it was her money, separate from Arthur's, a small bastion of financial independence that now felt like a lifeline. She counted out the bills, the crisp paper feeling heavy in her hand, and pushed them across the counter. Back home, Eleanor went straight to the bedroom. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she unwrapped the cameras. They were indeed tiny, almost imperceptible. She looked around the room, assessing the best vantage points. One, she decided, would go behind their large, framed wedding photograph on the dresser. The ornate silver frame offered the perfect camouflage, and its position provided a wide view of the bed and the main entrance to the room. The second camera found its home nestled among a row of hardcovers on a tall bookshelf, its small lens peering out from between the spines of classic literature. She adjusted them meticulously, angling them just so, ensuring there were no blind spots, that every corner of the room, every potential interaction, would be captured. With a deep, shaky breath, she downloaded the app Kevin had shown her. Her fingers trembled as she connected the cameras, watching as the live feed flickered to life on her smartphone screen. The bedroom, her sanctuary for over 3 decades, now appeared on the small rectangle of glass, an intimate space laid bare. She tested the angles, walking around the room, watching her own reflection appear and disappear. The image was surprisingly clear, the colors true. A cold, unyielding determination settled over her. There was no turning back now. The cameras were installed, the trap was set. She had stepped across a line, crossing from quiet suspicion to active investigation. The thought of what she might discover was a raw, aching fear, but she wouldn't shy away. She resolved to face whatever truth she uncovered, no matter how devastating, refusing to be the naive, easily dismissed wife Arthur clearly thought her to be. Her loneliness had festered long enough in the dark. It was time for light, no matter how cruel its illumination. For the next 6 days, Eleanor's phone became an extension of her hand. Every spare moment, she checked the feed. While Arthur was at work, she watched an empty room. When he was home, the camera showed him moving about, changing clothes, reading in bed. Nothing out of the ordinary. The uneventful footage started to fray her nerves. Had she truly lost her mind? Was this all a figment of her imagination, fueled by an aging marriage and an overactive intuition? The foolishness of her actions, the expense, the betrayal of trust, all these thoughts began to gnaw at her, making her second-guess every decision. She felt silly, paranoid, yet still a tiny spark of conviction remained, refusing to be extinguished. She kept watching. Thursday afternoon began like any other. Eleanor was pushing her cart through the brightly lit aisles of the grocery store, making her usual selections. The hum of the refrigeration units and the distant chatter of shoppers were a familiar soundtrack. She was halfway down the produce aisle, reaching for a bunch of organic kale, when her phone buzzed with an insistent vibration. It wasn't a text or a call, but the sharp, distinct alert from the camera app. Motion detected in the bedroom. Her heart leaped into her throat, a sudden cold terror gripping her. Arthur wasn't due home for another 2 hours. He had a standing late meeting on Thursdays. Who could possibly be in their bedroom? A burglar? Her mind raced, conjuring images of broken windows and ransacked drawers. With trembling fingers, she pulled her phone from her purse, her eyes scanning the notification. Motion detected. She hesitated for a split second, a primal urge to ignore it, to cling to the fragile piece of ignorance. But the determination she'd felt installing the cameras resurfaced, stealing her resolve. She tapped the app icon, her thumb feeling clumsy and stiff. The screen flickered to life, displaying a live feed of her bedroom. Her breath caught in her throat, a silent gasp that stole all the air from her lungs. It wasn't a burglar. It was Arthur. He walked into the frame, not alone, but with another woman. The world tilted. The vibrant colors of the produce aisle blurred into an indistinct mess. The noise of the grocery store faded to a distant hum, swallowed by the roar in her ears. She felt a wave of nausea, a sudden violent lurch in her stomach that threatened to make her physically ill right there between the organic vegetables and imported cheeses. And then, a second wave of sickness, far more potent than the first, slammed into her as her eyes registered the woman's face. It was Clara. Clara, her mind screamed the name, incredulous, horrified. Clara, her daughter-in-law, Thomas's wife, her son's wife. The young woman she had welcomed into their family with open arms, celebrated with at their wedding, shared holidays with, confided in. The betrayal was not just Arthur's but Clara's too, a double-edged sword plunging into her heart. On the screen, Arthur and Clara moved with a disturbing ease, a familiar intimacy that spoke volumes of Bassam. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, no furtive glances. This was not a first encounter. Their movements were practiced, fluid, the comfortable dance of lovers who knew each other well. Clara, all of 26 years old, laughed at something Arthur said, her head thrown back, a picture of youthful exuberance and vibrant energy that Eleanor suddenly felt acutely lacking in her own life. 26, barely half her own age, barely more than her own son. Eleanor stood frozen, the phone a burning square in her hand, unable to tear her eyes away from the grotesque tableau unfolding in her most private space. She watched in horror as they began to undress each other, a slow, deliberate unveiling of skin and desire. Arthur's hands, the same hands that had once caressed her with tenderness, now moved over Clara's body with an urgency and attentiveness that brought a fresh wave of agony. She saw the passion in his eyes, the light she hadn't seen directed at her for 5 long years. She saw the longing, the desire, the unreserved devotion that had been utterly absent from their marriage, now poured out for this young woman, her son's wife. Each touch, each whisper, each shared glance was a hammer blow to Eleanor's soul. She watched Arthur kiss Clara, a deep, hungry kiss that was worlds away from the polite pecks he gave her. She saw the way his eyes lingered on Clara's face, tracing her features, worshiping her. It was everything she had craved, everything she had mourned the loss of, played out before her on a tiny screen. A brutal, undeniable testament to her husband's infidelity and her own devastating neglect. The encounter lasted 23 minutes. Eleanor counted every single one, each second stretching into an eternity of humiliation and agony. 23 minutes of her marriage being systematically dismantled. 23 minutes of her family being irrevocably broken. 23 minutes of watching her husband give to another woman, her daughter-in-law, what he had denied her for half a decade. When it was over, when they had dressed and left the room as casually as they had entered, Eleanor stared at the empty screen. The final image of them walking out of frame burned into her mind. Her hands were shaking so violently she thought she might drop the phone. She closed the app, the world around her suddenly rushing back in. The grocery store noises, the bright lights, the mundane reality that seemed to mock her shattered existence. She felt like she was drowning in plain sight, a silent scream trapped in her chest, unable to escape. She abandoned her grocery cart right there in the aisle, leaving behind the forgotten kale and the carefully chosen provisions. Her legs felt like jelly, but she forced them to move, one agonizing step after another, until she reached her car. The drive home was a blur of tears and choked sobs. She had to pull over twice, once on a quiet residential street, and again in a deserted parking lot, unable to see through the torrent of tears blurring her vision. The image of Arthur and Clara, intertwined in her bed, in her home, was seared into her eyelids, a horrifying tableau that would forever haunt her. The truth she had sought, no matter the pain, had now found her, and it was far more devastating than anything she could have ever imagined. Eleanor finally made it home, the familiar brick facade offering no comfort. She parked the car, her hands still trembling on the steering wheel, and sat for a long moment simply breathing. The tears had stopped, leaving her eyes burning and her head throbbing. When she finally stepped inside, the silence of the house was oppressive. She walked straight to the bedroom, half expecting some visible sign of the desecration, a stray earring, a crumpled sheet. But the room was pristine, undisturbed, as if nothing untoward had ever happened within its walls. The betrayal was an invisible wound, its horror confined to the digital memory on her phone. The initial shock began to give way to a colder, more insidious processing. It wasn't just that Arthur was cheating. That alone was a devastating blow. It was who he was cheating with. Clara. Family. The woman her son, Thomas, adored. The woman he had chosen to spend his life with. The layers of betrayal were dizzying, an intricate web of deceit that entangled her husband, her daughter-in-law, and by extension, her own beloved son. How long had this been going on? Days, weeks, months? The thought of Thomas, oblivious and happy, planning their future with Clara, sent a fresh wave of agony through her. Her gaze fell on Arthur's sock drawer. The memory of the lubricant tube, the genesis of her suspicions, sparked a flicker of dark inspiration. A cold, deliberate resolve began to crystallize within her. She was not a victim. Not anymore. With a newfound purpose, Eleanor walked to the kitchen. She found the small bottle of potent chili oil she used sparingly in her cooking, its label promising an intense heat. Back in the bedroom, her hands were steady as she opened Arthur's drawer and retrieved the tube of personal lubricant. She carefully twisted open the cap, squeezing the viscous, clear gel into the toilet, watching it swirl away. Then, with a slow, meticulous precision, she refilled the empty tube with the bright red, fiery chili oil, ensuring it was full to the brim. Cap screwed on tightly. She replaced the doctored tube exactly where she'd found it, nestled beneath the socks. A strange, almost unsettling sense of peace settled over her. This was not revenge, not yet. This was a statement, a quiet, calculated move in a game she now realized she was forced to play. She was ready for a long game. 3 days later, the silence of the afternoon was shattered by a loud, guttural curse emanating from the bedroom. Eleanor was in the living room reading, but her ears immediately pricked up. She heard the distinct sound of the shower turning on, followed by a steady stream of running water that lasted for an unusually long time. Nearly an hour passed before Arthur emerged, red-faced and agitated, still toweling his hair. "What in God's name was that?" he fumed, rubbing vigorously at his nether regions through his bathrobe. "My skin is on fire, itchy, burning. I swear it feels like I've been stung by 1,000 bees." Eleanor, her face a mask of feigned concern, looked up from her book. "Oh, darling, what's wrong? Are you all right?" Arthur grumbled, "I don't know. Must be that new detergent you bought, Eleanor. It's irritating my skin. I feel like I need to dunk myself in ice water." "Oh dear," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with sympathy, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor of satisfaction passing through her. "I'm so sorry. I'll make sure to get the old one next time. Perhaps a soothing balm would help?" She resisted the urge to suggest the other tube in his drawer. The corner of her lips twitched slightly. He dismissed her concern, still muttering about the infernal itching. In the days that followed, Eleanor embarked on a meticulous, almost obsessive review of the camera feeds. She wasn't looking for another incident so much as piecing together the timeline, documenting the affair with a precision born of cold fury. She scrolled back through weeks, then months, her heart sinking with each revelation. It wasn't a fleeting fling, she realized with growing horror. This was a long-term, carefully hidden relationship, woven into the fabric of their lives, into family gatherings, into her own home. She saw Arthur's transformation with Clara. With her, he was playful, animated, his eyes sparkling with a youthful energy that had been absent from their marriage for years. He listened to Clara, laughed at her jokes, touched her arm with an easy familiarity that bespoke genuine affection. It was a stark contrast to the distant, often preoccupied man he was with Eleanor, the man who dismissed her concerns about their happiness with a shrug and a list of material comforts. The man she was married to was a performance, a facade. The man with Clara was the real Arthur, and the sight of him, so vibrant and alive with another woman, twisted a knife in her gut. She started observing subtle interactions between Arthur and Clara at family dinners, at casual Sunday lunches, signs she had been utterly oblivious to before. The lingering glances, the shared smiles, the casual brushes of hands as they reached for a serving dish. All of it had been there, in plain sight, hidden only by her trust, her naivete, and her own husband's masterful deception. Clara too played her part, always sweet, always attentive to Eleanor, always the doting daughter-in-law, a snake in the grass, coiled in her own home. Eleanor's heart ached, a constant throb of pain, as she watched Thomas, her son, so loving, so trusting, oblivious to the insidious betrayal. He spoke of having children with Clara, of building their own family legacy. Each word was a fresh wound, knowing the foundation of his dreams was built on such a rotten lie. The weight of this secret, the depth of this treachery, settled heavy on Eleanor's shoulders. She would not let it break her. She would make them pay. If you're finding this story as gripping as I am, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss how Eleanor's plan unfolds. Every click helps share her journey. 3 weeks had passed since Eleanor's life had fractured into a before and an after. 3 weeks of feigning normalcy, of biting her tongue, of watching Arthur and Clara interact with a sickening awareness that no one else shared. She moved through her days like a ghost, observing, calculating, a silent strategist in her own home. The chili oil incident had been a small, fleeting satisfaction, a mere pinprick compared to the gaping wound in her heart. But it had also solidified her resolve. She would not simply react. She would act. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a day Arthur had ostensibly gone into the city for an early board meeting and was expected back late. Eleanor was in the kitchen, preparing a light dinner, when she heard voices from the living room. Her heart seized. The camera app on her phone showed the living room was empty. They were in the adjacent study, a room not covered by her bedroom cameras, a room Arthur usually kept private, but the door was ajar, and their voices, hushed but clear, drifted into the kitchen. She froze, every nerve ending tingling. She couldn't make out every word, but certain phrases, delivered with a chilling clarity, cut through the air. Clara's voice tinged with impatience and a brittle edge Eleanor had never heard before. Thomas keeps asking, Arthur, about kids, a real family. How much longer do I have to keep making excuses? It's exhausting playing house. Eleanor's grip tightened on the countertop, her knuckles white. Thomas, her sweet, trusting son. The cruel irony of Clara's words, playing house, struck her with the force of a physical blow. Clara was playing house with Thomas while she was building a future with Arthur. Then Arthur's voice, a low rumble of reassurance. Patience, my love. Just a little more time. I need to make sure everything is strategically arranged. Finances, I can't just walk away and lose everything. But you promised, Clara pressed, her voice rising slightly, betraying a deeper bitterness than Eleanor could have ever imagined. You said you'd leave her. We can't keep doing this indefinitely. I want a real life with you, Arthur, not stolen moments. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't just an affair, a sordid secret liaison. This was a plan. They were not simply indulging in illicit passion. They were actively plotting a future together, a future that involved Arthur leaving her once his financial affairs were strategically arranged. The casual cruelty of it, the cold calculation, made her stomach churn. They weren't just betraying her, they were dismantling her life piece by piece with a blueprint drawn up in secret. The depth of their deception was staggering, almost unfathomable. She stood there barely breathing until she heard the study door click shut, signaling their departure. When the front door opened and closed minutes later, Eleanor remained motionless, the conversation replaying in her mind, each word a venomous dart. The long game she had vaguely conceived suddenly took on a very real, very urgent dimension. She couldn't afford to merely react. She needed to orchestrate, to dismantle their plans before they dismantled hers. That night, as Arthur snored softly beside her, oblivious to the storm brewing, Eleanor lay awake, her mind a whirlwind of information. She carefully, discreetly, opened her laptop, the screen a soft glow in the darkness. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for a weapon. Her fingers, though still trembling slightly, typed "divorce attorneys for complex cases" into the search bar. She scrolled through pages of legal jargon, testimonials, and firm profiles. Her eyes landed on a name, Evelyn Carter. The profile spoke of a sharp, tenacious attorney known for handling high-net-worth divorces with discretion and an impressive track record for her clients. The description resonated with Eleanor's newfound resolve. She needed someone who was shrewd, uncompromising, and who understood the intricate dance of assets and betrayal. Evelyn Carter sounded like a formidable ally. Eleanor saved the contact information, her heart thumping with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She then cross-referenced Arthur's upcoming schedule, which he still innocently left on his office whiteboard. There was a projected business trip to San Francisco the following week, a conference he had mentioned. He would be gone for 3 days. Perfect. With a surge of adrenaline, Eleanor sent a discreet email to Evelyn Carter's office, requesting a confidential consultation. She specified her availability for the dates Arthur would be out of town, a detail that felt both clandestine and empowering. As she closed her laptop, the glow receding, she felt a profound shift within her. The victim she had been for the past 3 weeks, the heartbroken wife, was being replaced by someone new. A woman with a plan, a strategy, and a formidable opponent to face. The game had truly begun. The legal offices of Evelyn Carter were a study in understated power, polished dark wood, hushed tones, and an air of quiet efficiency. Eleanor felt a tremor of nerves as she sat across from Evelyn, a woman whose calm demeanor belied a formidable intellect. Eleanor recounted her story, the words flowing out in a torrent she had suppressed for weeks. She watched Evelyn's expression carefully, seeking judgment, but found only professional attentiveness. When she produced her phone and played the incriminating video, Evelyn watched with a steady gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mrs. Vance," Evelyn said, her voice measured but firm, as the video ended, "this is egregious. Adultery is a difficult enough betrayal, but this, with your daughter-in-law, this is a profound level of family destruction, and it will be viewed very seriously by the courts." Eleanor listened intently as Evelyn laid out her legal options. They were in Texas, a community property state, which meant assets acquired during the marriage were generally split equally. However, Evelyn explained, given the egregious nature of the circumstances, particularly the emotional distress and the familial betrayal, we may be able to argue for a disproportionate share of the community estate. Eleanor felt a flicker of hope, a warmth spreading through the cold dread that had taken root in her heart. The conversation shifted to Arthur's potential actions. Men in his position with significant assets often attempt to hide funds once they suspect a divorce is imminent, Evelyn cautioned. Given his comment about arranging his finances strategically, it's highly likely he's already making moves. Evelyn recommended immediate action, filing for divorce, accompanied by a temporary restraining order on all marital assets. This would freeze their accounts and prevent Arthur from transferring any funds or property without court approval. "We need to act swiftly, Mrs. Vance, before he can make good on his intentions." Leaving Evelyn's office, Eleanor felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. The stakes were impossibly high, but she was no longer adrift. She had an ally, a plan, and a growing sense of empowerment. Her first step was to secure Evelyn's services. She drove straight to their bank, walked up to the teller, and with a surprisingly steady hand, wrote a check for a $5,000 retainer from their joint checking account. It was a substantial sum, but she knew Arthur wouldn't discover it until the statement arrived, long after the legal wheels had been set in motion. The thought brought a grim satisfaction. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Thomas, about protecting him from the fallout of his father's and wife's monstrous deceit. As the days turned into a week, Eleanor's resolve hardened. She had decided on the perfect, agonizingly fitting moment to serve Arthur the divorce papers. Thomas and Clara were planning their second wedding anniversary party, a small, intimate gathering at a local restaurant where both families would be present. It would be devastating, public, and utterly unforgettable. The poetic justice of it sent a shiver down her spine. Then, just 1 week before the anniversary party, her vigilance paid off in a way she hadn't entirely anticipated. Arthur had been spending an unusual amount of time in his home office, his door often closed, his phone glued to his ear. One evening, feigning a need to retrieve a book from a shelf in the hallway outside his office, Eleanor paused, her ears straining. The door was slightly ajar, and she heard Arthur's voice, hushed but clear, followed by Clara's. "It's all set," Arthur whispered, a note of triumph in his voice. "The transfer is scheduled for next week. $800,000 moved to the offshore account. By the time Eleanor even thinks about looking, it'll be gone. Untraceable." Eleanor's blood ran cold. $800,000. He was planning to steal nearly $1 million from their shared future. From her, from everything they had built. The greed was as breathtaking as the betrayal. Then Clara's voice, a sickening giggle. "Good. She won't know what hit her. And Thomas? He'll be heartbroken, but he'll get over it. He's such a naive fool anyway, always talking about their future, their children." Arthur chuckled, a low, cruel sound. Indeed, he sees what he wants to see. It makes things easier, doesn't it? He'll be fine. He's always been too soft. Eleanor backed away from the door, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. They were mocking him, mocking her son, dismissing his feelings, his future, as if he were a minor inconvenience to their grand design. The venom in their voices, the sheer callousness, fueled a fire in Eleanor she hadn't known she possessed. She had been angry, devastated, hurt. Now she was enraged. Evelyn Carter would be very interested to hear about Arthur's offshore account. The game was escalating, and Eleanor was ready to play to win. The conversation Eleanor overheard in Arthur's office galvanized her into immediate action. The audacity of Arthur attempting to abscond with nearly $1 million while plotting to abandon her, compounded by Clara's casual cruelty towards Thomas, extinguished any lingering doubt. There was no going back, no softening the blow. This required a nuclear option. She retreated to her own space, pulling out her phone and dialing Evelyn Carter's number. The attorney answered after the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Eleanor, her own voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, relayed Arthur's plan to transfer $800,000 to an offshore account. Evelyn listened without interruption. Then her response was immediate and decisive. "That changes everything, Mrs. Vance. I'm filing an emergency motion first thing tomorrow morning to freeze all joint assets. We'll get that transfer stopped dead in its tracks." A wave of relief washed over Eleanor, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by the cold, hard focus on what still needed to be done. Over the next few days, Eleanor became a digital archivist. She meticulously downloaded and made multiple copies of all the damaging recordings from her bedroom cameras, saving them to encrypted USB drives and cloud storage. She timestamped each file, documenting every illicit rendezvous, every whispered endearment between Arthur and Clara. She gathered the evidence of Arthur's increasing dismissiveness toward her, the financial records that would soon show his attempted asset flight. This was her ammunition, and she was preparing it with the precision of a seasoned general. The anniversary party loomed, a date circled in red on her mental calendar. Thomas and Clara had rented an elegant event space at the exclusive country club, anticipating around 50 guests, a mix of close family, including Arthur's siblings and her own, and their closest friends. It was meant to be a joyous occasion, a celebration of young love. It would be anything but. Eleanor's plan began to take shape. She called a local audio-visual company, explaining she was hosting a surprise roast for a friend's milestone birthday and needed a professional sound system with a wireless microphone and speakers. She made sure it was delivered and set up at the country club in advance, disguised as part of the entertainment for the anniversary. The staff at the club, familiar with her, accepted her explanation without question. She bought a new dress, a sophisticated emerald green that complemented her eyes, and booked an appointment at her favorite salon to have her hair styled. She was determined to look composed, elegant, and utterly in control. She would not allow them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. She would present herself as a woman wronged, yes, but also as a woman who had risen from the ashes. Maintaining a normal facade around Arthur and Thomas during this time was perhaps the hardest part. Arthur was his usual self, perhaps a little more distracted with his business dealings, but otherwise oblivious. Thomas, however, was a constant heartache. His innocence, his genuine excitement about the upcoming party, his earnest discussions about future plans with Clara, each conversation was a fresh stab to Eleanor's heart. He talked about taking Clara to Italy, about baby names, about building an addition to their home. Each dream he articulated underscored the depth of the betrayal he was about to discover. Yet Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that he deserved the truth, no matter how painful. The illusion was a far crueler prison than the harsh light of reality. The night before the party, Eleanor locked herself in her study, the prepared envelopes laid out on her desk. Each contained a curated selection of the most damning video evidence and a brief explanatory note. There was one for Thomas, one for Arthur's sister, Margaret, who had always been kind to Eleanor, and one for her own brother, Richard. She wanted the immediate family to grasp the full scope of the treachery, to see the proof with their own eyes. She reviewed her speech one last time, standing before her mirror, her reflection a stranger in her new dress. It was not a rant. It was calm, factual, devastating. She would not scream, would not cry. She would simply state the truth, supported by irrefutable evidence. She practiced the pauses, the inflections, ensuring her voice would remain steady, betraying no weakness. A final reassuring message came from Evelyn's office. The process server was fully briefed and ready. He would be discreetly positioned at the country club, waiting for Eleanor's signal to serve Arthur the divorce papers. All the pieces were in place. The trap was sprung. Tomorrow, the truth would be unleashed. The country club ballroom shimmered under the soft glow of fairy lights, its tables adorned with white linen and elegant floral centerpieces. It was beautifully decorated, a perfect setting for Thomas and Clara's second anniversary party. Eleanor arrived early, her emerald dress feeling alien yet empowering. She moved with practiced ease, checking the sound system she had rented, ensuring the wireless microphone was ready. She discreetly placed the envelopes containing the damning evidence under the placemats at specific family tables, their secrets hidden for now. Arthur, true to form, played the role of the proud, devoted husband, his arm casually draped around Eleanor's waist for photos, his smile reaching his eyes only when it was convenient. Clara, stunning in a flowing ivory gown, glowed with an effervescent, albeit entirely fake, happiness. She moved among the guests, her laughter tinkling, her hand often finding Thomas's. Thomas, bless his naive heart, beamed with pride and boundless love for his wife, utterly oblivious to the storm about to break. Eleanor played her part too, mingling, smiling, her pleasant demeanor a thin veil over the tempest raging within her. Every nerve in her body vibrated with a potent cocktail of anticipation and dread. Dinner proceeded, a drawn-out prelude to the main event. Finally, it was time for the toasts. Thomas rose first, his voice choked with emotion, as he spoke of Clara as his soulmate, his partner, the woman he dreamed of starting a family with. His words, earnest and full of genuine affection, were a dagger to Eleanor's heart, a reminder of the precious innocence she was about to shatter. Clara followed, thanking everyone with practiced grace, her eyes flickering to Arthur for a fleeting moment, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile passing between them. Then, it was Eleanor's turn for what was ostensibly the closing remarks. She walked toward the stage, her high heels clicking softly on the polished floor, a confident rhythm that belied the turmoil within. She picked up the wireless microphone, its weight a comforting anchor in her hand. The room quieted, expectant. "Good evening, everyone," Eleanor began, her voice clear and steady, amplified by the sound system. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the faces of her family and friends. "Tonight we celebrate love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage." Her eyes found Arthur's, then Clara's. She noticed the slight shift in their posture, the almost imperceptible tightening of their smiles. "Marriage is built on trust," she continued, her voice gaining a subtle edge. "And when that trust is betrayed, when loyalty is shattered, the foundation crumbles, leaving behind only ruins." Arthur's eyes narrowed, Clara's began to dart nervously. Eleanor reached into the pocket of her dress, pulling out her phone. She connected it to the sound system's aux input with a practiced move. A low hum filled the room, then her voice, calm and devastatingly clear. I believe sometimes the truth needs a little amplification. She tapped her screen. The first audio file began to play, filling the elegant ballroom with Clara's impatient voice. Thomas keeps asking, Arthur, about kids, a real family. How much longer do I have to keep making excuses? It's exhausting playing house. Then Arthur's reassuring rumble. Patience, my love, I can't just walk away and lose everything. Clara's bitter retort. But you promised. I want a real life with you, Arthur. Not stolen moments. Gasps rippled through the room, faces contorted in shock. Thomas, at the head table, had gone utterly white, his fork clattering to his plate. Clara, her composure finally breaking, screamed, Eleanor, stop! What are you doing? Eleanor ignored her, her gaze fixed on the horrified faces of the guests. She tapped her phone again. The second audio file began, Arthur's triumphant whisper, It's all set. $800,000 moved to the offshore account. By the time Eleanor even thinks about looking, it'll be gone. Untraceable. Then Clara's sickening giggle. Good. She won't know what hit her. And Thomas, he'll be heartbroken, but he'll get over it. He's such a naive fool anyway. A collective gasp, louder this time. Arthur, his face a mask of fury, tried to rush the stage, but Marcus, Eleanor's brother, stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Arthur, what the hell is this? Marcus demanded. Clara, her face streaked with tears, weakly denied it. It's not true. She's lying. Eleanor raised the microphone to her lips, her voice chillingly calm. It's all true. For the past 8 months, my husband, Arthur, and my daughter-in-law, Clara, have been engaged in an affair in our home, in my bed. She then walked directly to Thomas, his eyes wide with a pain so profound it broke her heart. She handed him the first envelope. These are just a few pictures, Thomas, from the hidden cameras in our bedroom. Evidence of their love. Thomas's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. He stared at the photos, his face crumpling. The envelope slipped from his grasp, scattering images of Arthur and Clara, intertwined across the pristine white tablecloth. He looked at Arthur, his own father, then at Clara, his wife, his entire world shattering around him. Dad? Clara, is this true? He choked out, his voice barely a whisper. Arthur couldn't meet his son's gaze. Eleanor, her eyes sweeping the room, then began her final act. For those who require further convincing, she announced, her voice resonating through the shocked silence. You'll find more evidence under your placemats. Please feel free to review. A flurry of rustling paper erupted as guests, horrified yet morbidly curious, discovered the envelopes. Their faces, as they absorbed the contents, painted a canvas of disbelief, disgust, and outrage. Arthur and Clara's reputations, meticulously built over years, crumbled into dust. Clara, now fully hysterical, shrieked at Eleanor, You vengeful bitch! You ruined everything! Eleanor met her gaze, her expression unyielding. No, Clara, she retorted, her voice a steel whip. You and Arthur ruined everything. I just made sure everyone knew about it. As the chaos reached a crescendo, Eleanor quietly pulled out her phone and sent a single text message to Evelyn. Now. Moments later, the double doors of the ballroom swung open. A man in a sharp suit, Evelyn's process server, strode directly to Arthur, who stood frozen in stunned fury. Arthur Vance? He stated, holding out a stack of documents. You've been served. These are divorce papers and a temporary restraining order freezing all your assets. The party erupted into pandemonium. Thomas, devastated, stumbled away. Clara dissolved into gut-wrenching sobs. Friends and family looked on in horror, some comforting Thomas, others glaring at Arthur and Clara. Eleanor, amidst the shattered remains of what was supposed to be a celebration, felt a strange, profound sense of calm. The truth was out, and it was glorious. 6 months later, Eleanor sat on the balcony of her new apartment, sipping her morning coffee. The air was crisp, and the tranquil expanse of the lake spread out before her, reflecting the soft morning light. The chaos of that anniversary party, the painful divorce proceedings, the unraveling of her old life, it all felt like a distant, tumultuous dream. The divorce was finalized, and thanks to Evelyn Carter's relentless pursuit, It had been a resounding victory for Eleanor. Evelyn had not only successfully recovered the $800,000 Arthur attempted to transfer offshore, but the judge, thoroughly appalled by Arthur's morally reprehensible behavior and the egregious nature of the affair with his daughter-in-law, had granted Eleanor a disproportionate share, 70% of all marital assets, substantial alimony, and full ownership of their beautiful, sprawling family home. Arthur's once high-powered image had been utterly demolished, his reputation in tatters. He and Clara had quietly disappeared to Florida, their grand plans for a shared future now tainted by scandal and financial ruin. Clara's fate had been even harsher. Her parents, utterly disgusted by her actions, had disowned her. She also faced legal troubles for a string of credit cards she had secretly opened in Thomas's name, something Eleanor's team had uncovered during the divorce investigations. The web of deceit was deeper than even Eleanor had imagined. Thomas, her son, had been devastated. The pain of discovering his wife and father's betrayal was profound, a wound that festered for weeks. But with Eleanor's unwavering support and the guidance of a good therapist, he had slowly, painstakingly, begun to heal. He filed for divorce from Clara, a necessary step towards reclaiming his own life. Months later, Eleanor had been thrilled to hear he was dating Emily, a kind and intelligent elementary school teacher. Eleanor had already met Emily and seen the genuine happiness in Thomas's eyes, a light that had been extinguished for too long. He deserved someone who truly understood and cherished him, not someone playing house. For Eleanor, the initial aftermath of the divorce had brought a strange sense of emptiness. For 32 years, she had defined herself as Arthur's wife, her identity woven inextricably with his. Now she was simply Eleanor, adrift in a sea of newfound freedom. Her sister, Brenda, sensing her quiet struggle, had suggested she try a pottery class at the local community center. Hesitantly, Eleanor had agreed. From the moment her hands touched the cool, pliable clay, something shifted. She discovered a natural talent, an innate connection to the earth beneath her fingertips. The rhythmic hum of the pottery wheel, the focus required to center the clay, the meditative process of shaping and forming, it all brought a profound sense of peace. Sylvia, her kind, encouraging instructor, quickly became more than a teacher. She became a mentor and a friend, recognizing Eleanor's potential and nurturing her burgeoning passion. Eleanor found immense satisfaction in creating and transforming a lump of clay into something beautiful and functional. Through the pottery class, Eleanor also built a new support group. Diane, a spirited widow who had found a second life in ceramics, and Nancy, a retired nurse with a mischievous sense of humor, became her confidants, her companions in this unexpected journey of rediscovery. They went for coffee, shared stories, and laughed until their sides ached. It was a different kind of connection, one based on shared interests and genuine camaraderie, not the obligations of family or the expectations of a marital role. Eleanor was rediscovering her identity, brick by beautiful brick. A few weeks ago, her elegant, hand-thrown ceramic vase had won second place at the county art fair, an unexpected triumph that filled her with a quiet pride. A small local restaurant had even commissioned her to create custom serving bowls for their new seasonal menu. She felt a deep, abiding contentment, a happiness that sprang not from a relationship, not from external validation, but from within, from the work of her own hands and the strength of her own spirit. Her phone buzzed, pulling her gently from her reverie. A text from Thomas. "Dinner tonight with Emily? Would love for you to join us." Eleanor smiled. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of betrayal, was stronger than ever. Another text followed, this one from Sylvia. "Art fair application is open. We should sign up together." Eleanor chuckled. New adventures, new possibilities. Just then her doorbell chimed. She opened it to find a stunning bouquet of wildflowers on her doorstep, accompanied by a card. "To Eleanor for finding your beautiful strength. Love, Diane and Nancy." Tears of gratitude welled in her eyes. She was not alone. She was loved. As she turned back to her coffee, her phone rang again. An unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Eleanor Vance?" a smooth voice inquired. "My name is George Holloway. I own Holloway Gallery. I saw your work at the county fair. And frankly, Mrs. Vance, I'm captivated. I'd be very interested in discussing an exhibition of your ceramics." Eleanor walked back to the balcony, her heart soaring. She looked out at the tranquil lake, the sun now fully risen, painting the water in 1,000 shades of gold. Arthur and Clara's betrayal had been the most painful chapter of her life, but it had also been the catalyst, the brutal force that had pushed her to discover her true self. Her new, self-earned life stretched out before her, more vibrant, more beautiful, more authentic than she had ever dared to dream.